Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name's Amy Westervelt, and I'm a Principal Delivery Lead at Energy Web. I work with our customers to conceptualize, design, build, and deliver solutions that are based on Energy Web Green Proofs, which is our solution for registering and tracking low carbon products to help grow markets for them. I'd like to begin our intro to Greenproofs session today by giving you a high level overview of what Greenproofs is, and then we'll walk through an example of the types of problems that Greenproofs was designed to solve and why we think it is a powerful tool for decarbonizing industries and ultimately for fighting climate change. Daniel, please, next slide. And next slide, please. So what is Greenproofs? Next slide, please. Greenproofs is a customizable solution for registering and tracking low carbon products and their attributes through very complex supply chains. Greenproofs is unlike other blockchain based tracking solutions in that it doesn't just take existing sustainability products like carbon credits and data associated with those products and quote unquote put them on the blockchain or tokenize them. We go beyond that. Greenproofs uses blockchain and Web3 tech, including worker node networks, which we're going to talk a lot more about this week, to enable users to independently verify the attributes of the sustainable products that are being traced. So, in other words, what are the things that make those products more sustainable than their business as usual variants? This helps companies back up their product and decarbonization claims with really granular, verifiable, independently validatable data, if you will. And this in turn helps grow clean commodity markets. Why? Because the more a buyer can count on a product actually being green, the more willing she probably is to pay a premium for it. Next slide, please, Daniel. When I say green commodities, what is it that I'm referring to? Green commodities refers to products that are physically indistinguishable from others, but are made in a specifically low carbon or climate aligned way. Currently, we're working on green-proof solutions that support a number of different types of green commodities. And these include sustainable aviation fuel, low carbon shipping services, climate aligned Bitcoin mining, and greener electric vehicle charging. We have dedicated sessions throughout the day today to tell you more about these 4 projects. And I also want to tell you a little bit about the actors that Greenproof serves. What types of participants in these industries is Greenproofs designed to support? These include producers, buyers, traders, issuing bodies, regulators, and lastly, consortia of different businesses within an industry that are working together to grow and support new markets for clean commodities. Next slide, please. Now that we've walked through a quick overview of Greenproofs, I'd like to get a little more specific about how it helps these kinds of markets and these market participants. And for this, I'd like to invite you on a little journey to a company that we will call Green Beans. Next slide, please. Green Beans is a distributor of sustainably grown coffee based in Los Angeles, California. Green Beans supplies its coffee beans to shops, retail outlets, and restaurants all over the state of California. In 2022, Green Beans board made a bold decision to further its sustainability goals. They committed to reducing the company's annual overall emissions by 25% by the end of 2024. Today, let's imagine it's January 1st, 2023. Outside of Green Beans headquarters, there are 10 brand new electric delivery vans parked and ready to be loaded up with coffee beans for delivery. To support a sustainability goal, the first step Green Beans took is to address the largest contributor to its emissions, its fleet of delivery vehicles. Green Beans has also retired 10 old conventional vans and it's installed on-site charging stations. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to invite you for a little nerdy sustainability math. This investment into EVs is going to make a big sustainability impact for Green Beans. How much of an impact is it going to make? Using the number of miles that the fleet drives every year, along with the miles per gallon for their old fleet and the emissions intensity of gas, which is how much carbon is emitted when gas is burned, Green Beans found that its old fleet produced 107 metric tons of CO2 every year. To figure out how much its new fleet will emit, Green Beans first looked at the emissions that will be produced from the electricity that will be used to charge the cars. This is going to be electricity that is supplied from the California grid. In 2022, 44% of this electricity came from non-emitting sources. This includes wind, solar, nuclear, and hydro. This means on average, every kilowatt hour of electricity used in California in 2022 produced about a half a pound of CO2. That's better than in a lot of places, but it's still not great. Using this figure and the number of miles traveled per year, as well as the amount of electricity required to drive a mile, Green Beans finds that its new fleet is responsible for only 31 metric tons of CO2 a year. This does make for a very big emissions reduction. It's a reduction of 71% versus the old fleet and results in a reduction of 15% of the company's total emissions. Not too shabby. Next slide, please. So let's fast forward. It's 1 year later, January 1st, 2024. Green Beans has made additional investments into sustainability, like weatherizing its facilities to save heating and cooling costs and buying more efficient roasting equipment. But these measures, combined with the EV purchase, are still falling short of the sustainability goal. They are projected to reduce the company's emissions by only 20%. And that's, of course, still short of the 20% that Green Beans is targeting. So Green Beans needs to find additional ways that it can reduce emissions. Ideally, rather than by investing additional money into new means of reducing emissions, by extracting more value from the investments that it's already made. So the question comes up, can we extract any additional emission savings from this new fleet of electric vehicles? As you'll remember, the emissions that are generated by EVs are determined by the kind of electricity that's used to charge them. If this electricity can be greener, the charges are going to be cleaner and the emissions associated with those charges will be less. But Green Beans doesn't have the ability to install its own renewable or non-emitting electricity on site. It has to purchase electricity from its utility. One option that Green Beans does have is to use green proofs to buy low carbon electricity that was produced elsewhere using a method called book and claim. Green Proofs is also able to give Green Beans high quality, verifiable data about the type of electricity it's buying, how it was generated, where it was produced, and furthermore, Green Proofs lets Green Beans automate its purchases based on its vehicle's charging events and allows it to very easily track the fleet's emissions and sustainability impact. Here's how it works. Using decentralized technology, Green Proofs creates proofs of the sustainability attributes of a product, in this case, electricity. When we're talking about the sustainability attributes of electricity, we're referring to things like the generation type. Was it emitting or was it non-emitting? The location of production. Was it somewhere nearby? Was it somewhere far away from the consumption? How old the production facility is. Are we buying electricity from a new wind facility or from an old dam that was constructed in the 1950s? And lastly, when the electricity was generated. These proofs can be inspected by buyers, traders, regulators, and anyone else who needs to have a look at the granular data associated with them to inspect not only the sustainable attributes of the thing, but also how the proof was created. So for example, who agreed that the wind facility that generated this green proof was an actual wind facility? Next slide, please. These proofs are constructed so that they can be traded, transferred, split, or retired without any risk of duplication, double counting, or loss. This means, in the case of electricity, that the standard unit for buying and selling it can be split up to meet the needs of smaller companies like Green Beans. It also means that Green Proofs can support things like hourly electricity tracking, keeping track of precisely when a given unit of electricity was created. Next slide, please. Green Proofs uses this ability to break down electricity into hourly units to enable the matching of demand and supply. This means that Green Beans can automate purchases of clean electricity to cover its charging events by setting preferences to reflect the type of electricity it wants to buy and configuring its charging equipment to post its demand. Green Proof's matching logic is executed and verified by decentralized EnergyWebX worker nodes, which receive information about Green Beans EV charging sessions and match them to clean electricity that meets the company's requirements. We'll be talking a lot more about worker nodes in our session on EnergyWebX on Thursday. So if you're interested in learning more about this aspect of Green Proofs, I invite you to join us for a deeper dive then. Lastly, Greenbeans is able to draw upon sustainability reporting tools that are embedded in Greenproofs to calculate their additional emission savings and update their progress towards the 25% emissions reduction goal, minimizing the admin burden of measuring, recording, and reporting it. Next slide, please. Here is what Greenproofs does for Greenbeans. Here's the pie chart I showed you a few slides back. It shows the breakdown of the electricity supplying the California grid. As you'll remember, 44% of that electricity comes from non-emitting sources on an annual basis. That's not so bad, but it's not so good either. On an hourly basis, these percentages, however, can vary quite widely. Here's a chart that shows the average carbon intensity of the California grid at every hour during a spring day. As you can see, at some times the intensity is much higher than at others. This means that at these times, the grid is running off much dirtier generation. Greenbeans is able to get additional decarbonization value from its fleet by doing two things. First, it optimizes some of its fleet's charging for times when the grid is cleaner. And second, for charges that have to happen during intervals when the grid is dirtier, it uses Greenproofs to automatically purchase renewable electricity. And every kilowatt hour of renewable electricity purchased in that way can be traced back to its supplier with all of the attributes that we discussed earlier embedded in the proofs. Greenproofs then supports Greenbeans sustainability reporting by aggregating the emissions for every charge event throughout the year, including those that are matched with renewables. So Greenbeans gets a simple, synthesized report about all of the emissions that it has avoided with its EV fleet. And here are the results. As you remember, the old fleet created 107 metric tons of carbon a year, and the new fleet, before using Greenproofs, produced 31 metric tons of carbon a year. By optimizing its charging based on the carbon intensity of the grid and by automating hourly clean electricity purchases, Greenproofs helps Greenbeans save an additional 18 metric tons of carbon annually with minimal additional expenditure. This brings Greenbeans to a 24% annual reduction within striking distance of its goal. Now let's zoom out for a moment. As some of you know, in 2015, 196 different countries got together in Paris to commit to taking action on climate change. Their goal was to limit global warming to below 2 degrees Celsius, ideally to below 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. To do this, they committed to collectively reducing global emissions by 45% relative to 2010 levels, and to doing this by 2030. Next slide, please. And here's a graph that shows global emissions by sector. To meet the goals of the Paris Agreement, every one of these sectors has to reduce its emissions. And as you can see, emissions from transport are a pretty substantial slice of this pie. Electric vehicles are one of the best tools that we have for reducing this slice of the pie. But most EV charging isn't as clean as it could be. We could get a lot more value from our investments in this area, much more bang for our buck, if you will, by using tools like Greenproofs that make buying clean commodities easier, more transparent, and ultimately more impactful in the fight against climate change. So thank you for joining me for this short introduction to Greenproofs today. We're very excited to continue talking about Greenproofs and to share more detail in the next sessions on how Greenproofs is supporting decarbonization for transportation, aviation, shipping, and Bitcoin mining. So we hope you will stick around and join us at those sessions to learn more. Thank you.